I'll start by saying that, look, let's kind of come down to earth, come down to India, and let's recognize some of our, quixotic, as I would call, approaches to things. On the one hand, you want to do this, but on the other hand, you undermine it. Just let me give you some data which might allow us to wake ourselves up. See, India produces rice by using 6,000 liters of water. China does so with 600 liters of water. And the United States does that with 2,000 liters of water. So Indian agriculture is hugely energy inefficient. Okay? If you can save that energy, the carbon that you save would be equivalent, in my estimation, to the carbon that EVs would save with a 20% vehicular penetration. These are the low-hanging fruits which nobody is talking about. Okay? Now, let me come on to the road use itself. If you look at the road designs in India, okay, they are not what we call efficient grid-like topologies, hierarchically ordered. Okay? So if you look at Google Earth, Google Maps and so on, you'll find that it's always green ahead of the traffic light and always red before that. Okay? So we have designed roads so as to, have enormous road spaces, but the actual utilization is very low. You can have road congestion in Delhi on the main roads while boys are playing cricket on the subsidiary roads. Okay? So we don't have a grid topology, we have a point-to-point which we know is terrible from the point of view of managing traffic. So the slow speed and traffic speeds are coming down. So if you could have maintained traffic speeds at a reasonable level within the city, okay, the amount of saving in terms of carbon which you could do would again be probably in the range of around 10% of what you could have saved by EV emissions. Then there is also from the other side, from the NGO side, there is what I would call, and of course it also comes from the global side, which I would call an emotional green. Okay? Don't cut this tree, but the tree is in the middle of the road. Okay? Yet don't cut it. So the so-called absorption of carbon by the tree is about 1/100th or 1,000th that of the carbon which is emitted because of slowing down of the traffic. Okay, so there are all these kind of jokes going on in the country, and I think we need to wake up to understand this and really argue from our own point of view. Now, let me also make another point. Carbon and its damage is essentially cumulative. It's because of the totality of carbon which is left in the air. Is there any disagreement on that? No. So if you do that calculation, an average Indian has emitted 1/50th, 1/50 of the carbon that an American has emitted, and probably 1/60th that a Britisher, because they had the Industrial Revolution early. So, the point is, how can we yet, play a very major role in carbon reduction? That's my point. It cannot happen unless, as was argued in the earlier class, in the earlier session, we have a pricing for carbon. And we have a market mechanism to determine relative costs of energy. Okay. Without these two, we'll be always shooting in the dark. And this kind of administrative mechanisms, okay, are not going to sustain in the long run. Let me give a simple example because it just came from your presentation. If you talk of green hydrogen, I didn't know the policy was this in that detail, but you can see the implicit built-in subsidies there. But can you see it clearly? You can't, because there is a transmission let-off, right? You don't pay the transmission costs. Now, it's good for the economy to know what they are, even if you don't pay. So there is a more transparent way of ensuring that, which is not by these offsets, okay, but by proper pricing and then building it. Okay. So I'll tell you why it's required. See, right now it looks very good, and you might think of me as damaging the interests of the green industry, but it's not so. See, the entire thinking is trapped in the framework of a marginal renewable energy. Okay. That's why we have these kind of measures. Okay. Let's give a subsidy, let's take the taxes off, let's do this, and so on and so forth. However, if green has to go beyond 30%, the marginal strategies are not going to work. Okay? So you need a full-blooded strategy, and India can take a leadership role in this for two reasons. One is, why are, let us say, these kind of measures, where you just get the stamp of being green and you are able to raise bonds and so on happening. They're happening because the because America gave up at some time on the Paris Convention and refused to participate in the kind of primitive, I would call, carbon trading mechanism. So I think we can set up a carbon trading mechanism in India, okay? We can, based on carbon prices, and we also need to find the cost of energy, of various kinds of energy, and also to move the energy around. Okay? So today we don't have a reference. You are given a transmission off, but how do I know that, let us say, hydrogen in gas form piped over is not cheaper? How do I know? How does a policymaker know? It's become too complex to track, okay? To keep track. And therefore you need full-fledged markets, and that's what I'm coming to. So the next slide. Oh. In the middle. Yeah. So we need energy, first we need electricity markets because they can be the core of the energy markets. So they're not natural markets, but they're designed. Hence their efficiency depends upon the details of the design. Okay? Review studies have to be therefore carefully interpreted. So if there's a review study which says this market collapsed or something happened, then the problem is with the design, not the idea. Okay? And elsewhere it has worked because it was designed better. So why markets? The opportunity in reducing administrative governance load and regulation, particularly in electricity. Technological developments like cheap SCADA, continuous logging, on-the-fly analysis, very low-cost IT, which makes for separability between market failure segments like transmission and wires business, and other potentially competitive segments, which is happening, which has in many ways happened in India, but not entirely such as to bring about efficiency. Okay? Ownership separation and design competition is also possible, okay? which adds to the efficacy of the market. There are additional efficiency gains which you could not have had in a vertically integrated monopoly. Because in a vertically integrated monopoly, there's no way to determine time of the day pricing. You can only do it administratively. And if things change on the ground in terms of supply, renewable energy coming in, which changes the entire supply pattern, the supply can become much higher during the daylight hours. You have to work back. So there's no model to determine that administratively. So you'll have to have a market which determines it. Okay? So, and then if others can respond to it, demand can respond to it, supply and storage can respond to it, then you'll have a kind of increasing efficiency both in use and in investments. And I think the link between the two is important. Okay? So it's possible to put, potential to separate consumption and production over a much vaster space. What do I mean by that? You can have production here, consumption there. He's talking about green hydrogen being produced and consumed here, but the green part, the energy is coming from that side. He gets a nice deal in terms of the transmission. But let's price it and figure out whether socially it's optimum to situate the plant there, the factory there, or pull the energy out through the transmission line. We don't know that yet. Okay? So, so beyond a certain size and complexity, which the Indian system had reached long ago, it's the third largest electricity system in the world, okay? And potentially it can be extremely large. Okay? There are no efficient administrative regulatory solutions, and the vertically integrated monopoly is no longer possible for it's like going many, many steps backwards into almost another age. See, now, this is very important to realize. Much of the demand for electricity is yet to materialize. Okay? Indian electricity system at Chinese per capita income would be much larger than it is today in China, for the simple reason that we are a warm country. Okay? And could ultimately be 4 or 5 times larger than the US if India becomes a middle income country. Okay? But if our thought is that we are the only guys in India and the poor don't matter, then it's fine, we can talk at the margin. Okay? Yeah, see, markets in themselves are of no value, okay, unless they enhance social value and costs and reduce costs. So there was a lot of so-called markets which happened in electricity which went the wrong way because they were competition for itself, market for itself, and so on and so forth. So those have proven to be very destructive and very high cost as well. Okay. Now, how would you do this? I won't get into it, and I just read this out. It's all well known. So you need to separate the competitive segments, okay, from the non-competitive, and the non-competitive you must say is non-competitive. You can't say that I will make competition in wires. That's nonsense. So that today the electricity bill is trying to reverse that nonsense which was put in place, okay, by which you would have competition in the wires business in the same space in distribution. Okay. We had pointed that out very early, but nobody listened to us. Okay. Yeah, so competition for the market, that means the investment competition, because many of them are being bought by governments or they have market failures, okay? So when investment takes place, there must be the right technology choices, right low-cost choices. And when the operations happen, again, they must be competitive. And what markets can do is to link both. Create competition in this and link it to competition for the market. Okay? So the link between the two is important. Otherwise, efficiency gains are not there. Otherwise, for-profit entities can play the game. And they have been playing that game in electricity, and we know which way it has gone. Okay? So finally, the Supreme Court had to intervene. The Supreme Court had to be cajoled, and certain, ultra mega power plants had to be accommodated, of course, for the larger good of the nation, etc. Okay? So it's very important to design transmission pricing and design transmission correctly. See, now the current open access common carrier with a little bit of markets running through exchanges is only the first steps, or the baby steps really, in the direction of creating full-fledged markets. And only that can create value. In fact, if you can't go that way, you might as well go all the way and have public-owned, vertically integrated monopolies. Okay? They would serve the job better. And they were serving the job better in some ways. Okay? Yeah, so complete independence of transmission, ISO and exchange, these are all well known. Okay? Yeah, so in India, where are we and what do we need to do? We need to go ahead with day-ahead markets and balancing markets. The current CRC, the CRC has put out and the government has put out proposals and so on, and we need to go in that direction, but do the design very carefully. Okay? Capacity and energy markets that would work in tandem. We need to separate them. India is going that way very rightly, and we need to, but ensure that they work in tandem by the appropriate design. Now, that is not in the offing. Why? Because government is thinking of markets at the margin. Okay? That means markets for differences. Within a region, within a space, if I have a difference, I settle it across the market. But that's not how it should be. For real efficiency, for depth in the market, you'll need to bring all of electricity into the market. All of electricity being bid to be sold, and all of electricity being bid to be bought. Okay? That will create a dense market, and there are models by which these can be designed. Okay? It's now the usual argument is, look, what will happen to prices, because the volatility and market prices can go up. Actually, there's no problem, because retail customers can have 90% of their demand, maybe even 100% of their demand, ensured through long-term contracts. So what happens is the long-term contracts lie over the market and they get financialized. So when they get financialized, what it means is the price is the long-term contract. However, the allocation is based on the bidding and on the revealed prices. So we'll need a policy of financializing the long-term contracts, which can be done very easily in a certain way. Okay? So contracts go financial, so the effective price is known. However, there need not be any tariff shock to anybody, okay? Particularly for retail customers. Okay? Yeah. So transmission capacity has to be allocated not as it is today for the market at the very end, that means for the exchanges at the very end, but it will have to be reversed. In fact, transmission capacity is simply allocated to the market. That change needs to come. If that can come, Indian markets can be nudged into moving the right way. So bid-based capacity creation continues, which is a good thing that we have. DISCOMs must serve obligations. So choice of market access to all of our certain connected load, if they so desire, this is already there. Okay? So these are good things which have happened. Yeah, ISO and complete separation of transmission. This is also there on paper and in the law, but the government of India's officers believe so much in doing the good, okay, that they end up violating even not just the spirit but the letter of the law. And as a result, independence of transmission and generation and supply and so on is not exactly there. So open access even today gets cheated by government orders. Okay, the actual behavior. Okay. Merge all exchanges into one. See, the low price elasticity for electricity, okay, may mean that you may require a kind of safety regulation which can cover 90% of retail sales, okay, to ensure that the price in the market does not rise beyond. You don't need it, but it can be kept as a stopgap, as a kind of backstop arrangement so that the market evolves. Okay, so that if there are any ill designs, the private sector or the smart guys don't exploit the market to put enormous money in their pocket. Okay, which happened, by the way, with Enron and so on out there. And finally, Enron itself collapsed when it went the wrong way. Okay? So regulators' role has to be there in optimal capacity addition forecasts. Currently, it's not done, okay, which is crazy. And transmission planning, additionally, and declaring indicative transmission prices, which is happening. Okay, and megawatt mile distance, megawatt mile basis for transmission, which is already happening. Okay, so these are the things which need to happen. Now, what would be the impact? Okay, if you do it all correctly, and this is an idealization, just to think it through. Okay, see, the Indian system is just too fragmented in terms of ownership, mix of fuels, contracts, regional aspects, spread out over a vast region to be put together by administrative or direct interventionist regulatory mechanism, command and control kind of regulatory. True time of the day costs and hence prices will be revealed. They're simply not revealed today. Okay? Demand response to prices can actually happen. Now, demand response can be of many types. Final demand and intermediate demand in the form of not buying or buying more. Both can happen. And of course, storage demand and storage supply. Storage would have both components. It can demand and supply. Okay? So two-way variation. So essentially the way one sees it, there is nothing like a given load curve and there is nothing like a given demand curve. Okay? Right? The two will interact to give rise to an optimal if the market can be designed correctly. Okay? So response in terms of shifts in demand to match supply curve and storage and scheduling of supply and all would happen simultaneously. So it's kind of neutral to whether the demand is coming from people who want to shift, let's say green energy or electrons actually from one end to the other end, and they use it for hydrogen or just shift it or whatever it is that you want to use the grid for. Okay. So vast storage. Now in India, my belief is it will engender vast storage response, particularly for what I would call diurnal storage. See, if you are thinking of 40%, let us say, solar, in energy terms, not in capacity, I don't understand why people talk about capacity when it comes to, because the capacity required for X amount of solar energy is double that required for hydro. Okay? Because it's used only for so many hours. They're well known. So if you think in terms of energy and let's say 40% of the energy being delivered by solar, then you would need massive storage of.
So shall we please wrap up a bit?
Well, just give me a minute. Sure. Okay. Maybe a couple of minutes. Okay. So the point is, how do you do it? Okay. There is hidden potential in India, which very few are talking about, which is using our dams, pump storage. Okay. When you do pump storage, the loss of energy is only about 30%, 15% up and 15% down. And that's by going by 19th century or early 20th century technology. So if you see today's technology, this can come down marginally, let's say 25%. So if that is what it is, cheap solar produced during the hot hours when the sun is shining, through a pond storage can be shifted to the evening when the peak comes. And if you can do that, you would have cracked the big thing. Now, how do you do it? Not by administratively combining a solar plant with a dam, but by having the grid do it through proper pricing. Because then it can happen at a micro level. You can have micro, demands being met. You can have macro storage coming in, and you can have also micro storage coming in. So all of that is possible. Particularly pump storage is underrated in India. Now, why I'm saying India? India is one of the most irrigated areas in the world. We have the largest density of dams in the world. Okay, small dams all over. The total storage is still on a per capita basis very small. Okay, we need to add to that. That's of course one major thing. But the point is, these are all opportunities for setting up reversible turbines with pond storage. Okay? Yeah. So now, if you have a market for energy and its movement, which is what essentially I'm arguing for, it will allow for a carbon pricing mechanism to be transparently felt by everybody. Okay, and that I think is extremely important. My sense is the world will lose the fight against climate change unless the advanced countries can agree to a carbon pricing regime. Okay, so if otherwise they're talking, they are being hypocritical. Okay, there is also a need to not, let us say, how would I put it? To not, confuse the issue by bringing E, S, and G. Okay, E can be highly contradictory with G, and there was a morning story of that. Okay, you pursue E, and in that process screw up the tribals. Okay, So you don't want all that. So when you talk of E, talk of E. When you talk of S, talk of S. And when you talk of G, talk of G. Okay? By confusing the whole thing, what the hell are we trying to achieve? I don't know. I think Indian intellectuals need to question this. Okay? Yeah, so allow transparency for carbon pricing. So this is the way the response would happen. It's a simple diagram. Supply will impact prices, prices will impact supply, and so on. So there's a two-way thing which will lead to optimality. As we know, design markets have done in part. Okay? Yeah. So new types of demand, I talked about pump storage. Hydro's value in balancing would be required. Today, hydro is highly undervalued. Okay? And hydro provides the bulk of India's green. Okay? Highly undervalued if you value it correctly, and you're not valuing it correctly because its balancing aspect is not getting addressed at all. Okay? Solar, so this I have run. So also the value of prediction. Startups can come and develop all kinds of software to predict. Okay? So that once you predict, the scheduling can take place proper, the bidding can take place better. Okay? Yeah, so solar hydrogen linked to grid for differences in remote areas can lower the transmission cost and improve time. Green methane from photosynthesis may also happen because people will now know the relative prices and respond to that. Okay? Instead of the other way around, you have a sense and then you respond, and then you hope that the relative prices are correct. So I'll stop here. Okay? And yeah, so there is also one more thing which I'll just mention. There are old hydro projects, like Koina. Now, if you look at Koina, it's at 3,000 feet high, roughly around that, and the water goes onto the Konkan side. It generates only electricity and the water just flows into the sea. Correct? Now, if this water can be diverted on the other side, the agricultural problem and the kind of Deccan's enormous hunger for water can be sorted. But you lose the electricity, but you need not lose the electricity value. Okay? The kind of load balancing aspect of Konkan storage need not be lost. So I'll end here and say that, look, the need for transparent pricing of carbon and for a price mechanism which is reasonably okay by designing an okay market mechanism is very important, because the problem has become far too complex for the globe, for India, to handle administratively and marginally, which is what we are doing. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.